Hello, everyone. Welcome to Connecting with Ideas 101. What are the chances? We were talking about the Christians, and I want to say again, what is going on in this philosophy unit whenever we're talking about philosophy? There are several things that I'm doing wrong. They're the same things that everyone does wrong, meaning I can't talk about everybody. If you were in a real philosophy class, you would go into a lot greater depth, which would be a good thing. You would learn more, and you would also cover more philosophers. And we are skipping, at times, we're skipping hundreds of years. And I don't want to give the impression that there was no philosophy being done in that time gap, because there was philosophy. The other thing that's funny about any philosophy class, and not only mine, but even a real class, and I really do encourage, if this at all interests you, do take a philosophy class. We have philosophy professors who know a lot more about it than I do, and some of them are very, very, very good. Any philosophy class, when we talk about stuff, the people we talk about are the iconoclasts, the people who change stuff, the people who have a new idea, a new way of doing things. And that gives the impression that this is how philosophy goes. Well, there are always philosophers who are doing things, but they're doing them the same way, and they're making progress, right? And so, for example, we had Plato, and then we had Aristotle doing something different. And the idea you get sometimes is, well, there was Plato and then there was Aristotle. Well, yeah, that's true, but there was Plato and there were a bunch of Platonists. There were a lot of followers of Plato who were doing things at his school, right, at the academy, and they were teaching other students, and they were developing and refining the ideas of Plato and Socrates. And then along comes Aristotle, and he changed some stuff, and he had his own students at his own school, the Lyceum. And then who did we talk about next? The Christians. And I don't know if I mentioned some names. Christians and pagans. There were pagans at the same time who had some ideas of Christians. What I really should have said was Neoplatonists. The Christians, of course, were Neoplatonists with an extra spin that they got from the writings of Paul and the apostles. But there were lots of Neoplatonists doing things, and we don't name any of them. We don't mention them. And so 99% of the philosophy that's being done is conventional philosophy, and it never gets mentioned because, you know, it's conventional. It's people are doing more stuff with Plato. Okay, fine. We had just finished talking about the Christians and their Neoplatonism, where they took Plato's ideas and they expanded on them. And so what happened to Aristotle? Aristotle kind of got thrown out the baby with the bathwater, right? Aristotle was not very popular among the early Christians, and Aristotle's writings, many of them ended up being lost, right? This isn't a thing where you go on Amazon and you say, hey, order a copy of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. That's one of his books on ethics. And you could do that. You can go on Amazon and get a copy, and it'll arrive tomorrow or 2 days from now. And isn't that convenient? In the ancient times, if you wanted a copy, you had to find someone who had a copy, and then at considerable time, expense, and effort, you had to have someone copy it for you. You would probably hire that done because there were specialists who were very good at handwriting and copying and neatness and all those good things. But it wasn't an easy thing to get a copy of a book. What that meant was that if there was an old book that no one was copying because it was less popular, when that book finally gets eaten by the bugs, rotted from the humidity, you know, all things pass. And if the book passes, and if it's one of the few remaining copies, well, that book is gone, and it's gone forever. So we have lost maybe a half, maybe 2/3, maybe 1/3. I'm not an expert. Look it up sometime. Most of Aristotle's writings are gone to us. And at this time, we're approaching the 1200s. Aristotle's writings were starting to become a little more popular again, and they were coming into Europe not from the original Greek, which Aristotle wrote in, but they were coming into Europe. Everyone was speaking Latin. I shouldn't say everyone, but scholars were speaking Latin. And there were new Latin translations, as I say, not from the Greek, but from Arabic, right? So Aristotle wrote in Greek. He had a certain popularity among the Muslim philosophers. And there are several famous ones I could mention: Averroes, Ibn Rashid, these people, Avicenna, they were very, very important. And they were writing about Aristotle, and they were expanding on his ideas. And then these Arabic translations were translated into Latin and were being read again in the West, in Europe. And people were getting interested in this, and they thought, there might be something to this. Okay, so this is where we take up the thread of our story, and we will have the 5 branches of philosophy, and we'll talk about them. We're in the 1200s. And the fellow's name is Thomas Aquinas. In the Catholic Church, he was beatified. He was made a saint, and so we call him Saint Thomas Aquinas. His dates were 1225 to 1274. So this is the 13th century. He was at the University of Paris, and the University of Paris still exists. You could go there. You could enroll, become a student, and study at the same university that Saint Thomas Aquinas taught at almost 800 years ago. And you think, wow, a university can last that long. Well, CWI, we're 11 years old, so they have a head start, but we're going strong. We're going to show them. So there you go, St. Thomas Aquinas. I mentioned that the Catholic Church made him a saint, and so you're getting an idea that he does have some Christian background, and definitely he does. He's a very, very important thinker in the history of Christian ideas. And so if you wonder what his metaphysics are, well, yeah, there's a God, obviously. There is a world. This is the world. And where did it come from? It was created in 6 days. This is all in the book of Genesis, right? And these things, he's going to go along with that. There's a heaven, there's a hell, there are angels, there are demons. God is a trinity. The Christians had established that earlier under the Neoplatonic times. But what was different about Aquinas is that he was a Neo-Aristotelian. So we had the Neoplatonists. People who took Plato's ideas were the Neoplatonists. St. Thomas Aquinas was a Neo-Aristotelian. And this kind of got him in trouble, right? The establishment at that time was heavily Christian and heavily Platonic. And Aquinas, at the beginning when he was writing about Aristotle's ideas, got a little bit of a pushback. But Thomas Aquinas was so good at what he did. Brilliant, brilliant philosopher. I mean, you can disagree with half of what he says if you want to, but you can't deny that he was brilliant. He did amazing, amazing things. And so he kind of turned things around. And from then on, I mean, Plato is still very, very important. I don't want to say that, oh, people ignored Plato from then on. No, that's not so, but there was a lot of Aristotelianism put in. So you think, what were Aristotle's different ideas about metaphysics? Well, you can think of the 4 causes, right? St. Thomas Aquinas liked those 4 causes a lot and wrote about them. I don't want to talk a lot about his metaphysics, though. I want to jump onto his epistemology, because he did something remarkable that no one else had ever done before. And this is one of the reasons that everyone kind of went crazy. So epistemology, well, yeah, there is a healthy dose of Christianity. Is there such a thing as truth? Yes, there's truth, right? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So there's truth, and it's Jesus. And okay, he's going to be this religious person. That's fine. We can ignore that for this class, or at least for this lecture. He does believe in truth. It's what God says, that sort of thing. But the other thing for epistemology, what he did was, again, he's going back to Aristotle. He really, really liked Aristotle's writings on logic. And so Aristotle's logic, Aristotle had several books on logic. Several of them, 5 or 6 of them, have survived. The Organon, a book that's just titled Logic, and there are 4 or 5 others. You could read them, I guess, if you wanted to. You probably would want to read those in some sort of summary, right? There are courses in logic you can take, right? In the philosophy department, there's a class called Logic, and it's logic. And in the math department, not at our school because we only have the first couple years, but if you were an upper division math student, there are typically math classes in logic. When I got my master's degree, one of my qualifying exams, one of my quals, was in logic, and it was mathematical logic. The logic classes in the philosophy department are usually taught by members of the philosophy department, but in the past, I know at least a couple times they have been taught by math professors, which is kind of cool. Oh, I would love to teach that. I need to remind them that I'm available if you ever want someone to teach logic. Well, that's fine. Okay, Aristotelian logic is coming back. So this is the syllogisms, right? You read about these, the major and minor premises. This was a long, long time ago. Here's what St. Thomas Aquinas did that no one had done before. Is St. Thomas Aquinas applied logic to theology. And this is just a crazy, crazy, crazy thing. I mean, nowadays you think, well, yeah, okay. But at that time, it blew everyone's mind. Here's the deal. If you want to know about God, right? Because there's a healthy context of Christianity here. If you want to know about God, what do? Well, you ask the Pope. You ask your priest. You go to your church and you perform the ceremonies and the rituals that there are. And if you want to go to the source materials, what they call, you could read the Bible, right? You could read the Old Testament and the New Testament, and that's how you learn about God, because there are prophets who have God talked to them and he told them what to say, and there you go. And so that's how you do theology. St. Thomas Aquinas comes along and says, if you just want to think about God, you could just think about God, and you could apply the tenets, the practices, the methods of logic, and you can figure stuff out about God without talking to the Pope, without talking to your priest, without going to a church, without reading some so-called scripture. You can just sit in your chair and think about it and figure out what God is and who he is and what he's like and some of his characteristics. You won't get the whole picture, of course, right? I mean, Thomas Aquinas was very much a Christian, and he very much said, yeah, you should read the Bible, and here are the reasons. But he applied logic to theology, and this was a crazy, crazy thing. The book that did this is the Summa Theologica, and people still read it. I have a copy. It was written in Latin, that's why it's called Summa Theologica. Summa means the highest, like summa cum laude. If you graduate summa cum laude, that means with the highest praise. It's a Latin word meaning the highest, or like the summit of a mountain. That's the highest point. And in this Summa Theologica, among other things, he has these five proofs of God. So this is maybe one of the first questions that theology should answer is, well, when you say God, I don't even know if there is a God. I'm not sure there's a God, or I don't think there's a God. St. Thomas Aquinas says, yeah, God exists, and in fact, you can prove that he exists using Aristotelian logic. And so he has these 5 classical proofs of God. They're called the classical proofs. They're about 800 years old. People still write about them. People still argue about whether or not these proofs are legitimate. And some people say yes, and some people say no. Most people say, well, I shouldn't say most. Some people, let me say it this way. Almost everyone recognizes, yeah, there are some problems with it. A lot of people think that the problems can be fixed. And so there are philosophers who still, my dad uses these arguments. One of Aristotle's ideas was the cosmological argument, right? Look at the stuff. Look at how cool it is. Look at how everything's put together. How could this happen without a creator? Ta-da, there you go. There must be a God. And this is called the cosmological proof. And he has 4 other proofs. So there are these proofs of God which depend on logic, not on some experience, some religious experience, some prophet or whatever. Did he have ideas on politics, ethics, and all the rest? Yes, he did, and we just don't have time to do everything. I encourage you to look him up. He's very, very important. He's still influential today. There are things that you do, things that you say, things that you'll see on a TV show or a movie that come from Thomas Aquinas's writings, and we have all of his writings. He wrote a lot of stuff, and we have it all, and people still talk about it. It's an entire bookshelf of stuff. Okay, after Thomas Aquinas, there's this category called the Scholastics, and I'm going to put this in scare quotes because I'm not going to name any. I'll name a couple. Occam. If you've heard of Occam's razor, and some of you have. If you haven't, that's okay. You should look it up sometime. Occam's razor. Occam was one of the scholastics. There was a fellow named Duns Scotus. Scotus because he's from Scotland. He's from Scotland. He was Scottish. And his name is Duns Scotus. Duns spelled D-U-N-S, which kind of sounds like dunce, right? Doesn't it? It's like when I was younger, I always thought, when I learned this first time, I thought, Duns Scotus, that's kind of an insult. Well, yeah, it is kind of an insult. And in fact, our English word dunce comes from the name of Duns Scotus. And you think, well, that's a mean thing to say about someone. It's like, my friend Fred. My friend Fred is so stupid that from now on, whenever someone does something stupid, we're going to say, "Hey, don't be such a Fred." And then, it catches on, and everyone says, "Well, that's kind of mean." It's kind of mean to Fred to turn his name into this negative epithet. Well, this is what happened with Duns Scotus, and in fact, being a scholastic, this is a horrible insult nowadays. You go to a philosophy convention and you hobnob with the famous philosophers and you say, "Hey, what do you think about so-and-so?" And you say, "Oh, well, he's kind of a scholastic." Well, you've just dissed him. You've just ripped him a new one. That's a mean thing to say about a philosopher. And the reason is the scholastics, what they did was brilliant. We're skipping their metaphysics and everything. We're just focusing on their epistemology. They liked what Thomas Aquinas did in applying logic to theology. And so the scholastics, and it comes from the word school, right? You think, well, scholastic, that's like a school thing. Yeah, these were professors by and large. It was logic on steroids. I mean, if you can do something with logic, let's just push the logic envelope and see how much we can do with logic. And they kind of went crazy with it. And you talk about Aristotle's syllogisms. Oh man, they expanded that idea. And if you took a course in logic, you would study a lot of the things that the scholastics did develop, because a lot of what they developed was brilliant. They did so much with logic, though, that people thought they went overboard. And the insult is that they didn't pay attention to what was important, right? They're kind of living in this ivory tower, right? They're scholastics, they're university professors, and they don't have contact with real life things that matter, common sense. They're just stuck on their logic. And the insult, you've heard this maybe, is that they would debate such questions as, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? And you think, well, what does it matter? Who cares about? And the fact is, I don't think they ever did. I think that's just a story. I'm not sure that you can find a reference where they actually did that. But this is the reputation they had. And so those are the scholastics. They did important stuff with logic, and we will come back to logic, right? Why this logic thread? I've already given you a hint, because logic is not only a branch of epistemology, it's not only a philosophical topic, but later on it does become a mathematical topic. And I'm a math professor, and so yeah, I'm going to talk about it in that context as well. Let's move forward another few hundred years, and we are going to talk about a Frenchman whose name is Rene Descartes, smartest man alive. I say that, it's kind of a joke. He lived from 1596 to 1650. Yeah, it's a running joke in my algebra class. If you ever take algebra from me, you'll hear me say this. So Rene Descartes, why is he even in my algebra class? Well, if you've learned the Cartesian, so there's Cartes, right? The Cartesian coordinate system, that's your X and Y axes. He invented that. He was the one who wrote about it, and everyone thought, hey, this is kind of a good idea that Rene had. And so anyway, I introduce him and I say he's the smartest man alive, and I'll tell you why in a second. And then we talk about the Cartesian coordinate system every once in a while, and every time I say the word Rene Descartes, I always say smartest man alive. And so it's kind of a running joke. I put it on my test, Rene Descartes was, and there's a multiple choice, and the choices are smartest man alive. So there's Rene Descartes. I'm not sure he was the smartest man alive, but I say he was. Metaphysics, yeah. I'm not going to talk about his metaphysics. I will just a little bit. Let's start with his metaphysics. What Rene Descartes wanted to do was he wanted to have a systematic philosophy, and he wasn't the first systematic philosopher. Of course, Aristotle invented all these terms, right? He invented metaphysics and epistemology. I shouldn't say he invented the terms because they're Greek words, but he was the one who categorized philosophy as answering these sorts of questions: metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, aesthetics, and nowadays there are other subtopics of philosophy. But Aristotle systematized things, and in his books, remember, his books were on a topic. So his book on logic is called Logic. Plato wrote things about reasoning, and none of them are called this book on reasoning. They're called the name of someone, whoever the dialogue was with. And so it's not quite as systematic. So Aristotle did a lot of systematization, and Rene Descartes comes along, and he decides in the 1600s that he wants to figure out philosophy, and he wants to really build it up from the ground. And so if you start with metaphysics, this is a good thing to do. And the first question of metaphysics is, what is there? What is reality? And I'm sitting here in my office, and I'm rapping with my knuckles. You can hear it. I'm rapping with my knuckles on this table, and I'm saying, well, there's a table. And so I guess that's part of reality, right? And we're going to start with the basics and the obvious things. Rene Descartes says, hold your horses, not so fast. Are you sure there's a table there? And I say, well, yeah, there's a table. It's right here. I'm touching it. Can't you hear it? And he says, are you sure there's a table? I say, yeah, look, I put it together. I mean, I didn't cut the boards, but I bought it as a kit and I screwed it together and I made this. I know this. He says, have you ever had a dream about a table? Well, yeah, I've had dreams about table. Oh, I see. Maybe I'm saying there's this table and I'm tapping on it with my knuckles, but maybe this is a dream and I'm just dreaming about this table. So maybe I don't know this table is here. I guess there's possibility of doubt. And nowadays, of course, if you want to have doubt, well, you watch Neo, right? Neo in the Matrix, not Neoplatonists or Neo-Aristotelians, but Neo in the Matrix. And hey, there were these evil, whatever, aliens, I guess, and they hooked your brains up to computers. And this is an old idea in philosophy. Maybe you're just a brain in a vat. How do you know this table is here? How do you know you have a body? How do you know you have 5 fingers on each hand? Maybe you have, right? Because you could be a brain in a vat hooked up with electrodes to a computer. Rene Descartes, smartest man alive, of course, did not have this idea of brains in vats with computers because there weren't any computers in those days. His idea was there's an evil demon who is clouding your mind. And yeah, okay, that works. It's the same idea. There's something that is making you think that there are things that you don't really have proof for. And so Rene Descartes, he used this method of radical doubt. Radical means extreme. And doubt, of course, is, well, you doubt something. I'm not really sure there's a table here. Okay, then throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you're not sure there's a table here, well, we're not using it for any part of our philosophy then, because we could be wrong. If it turns out there's not a table, and we've wasted a lot of time building up philosophy from the supposed existence of this tabletop. So Rene Descartes has thrown out the table, and he's thrown out the book I'm looking at, and the computer, and this piano, and the walls, and the house, and he's throwing out lots of stuff. And he's going as extreme as he can. If there's even a possibility of doubt, then get rid of it. He wants to be very systematic. He wants to build from first principles. This is a Cartesian idea. First principles. So he says, well, what are the things you can't doubt? And you think to yourself, well, Gary, what do you teach? I teach math. 2 + 2 = 4, right? That's a rule of math. And you think, well, 2 + 2 = 4. I mean, evil demon or not, you can't. I mean, obviously, 2 + 2 is 4. Okay, so there's something we could build on. And yes, it sounds nice. I've given you this facile argument just now. But Rene Descartes, in this complicated, complex way, if you read what he wrote, convinces you that no, you could doubt mathematical truths. Wait, a² + b² = c² might not be right. Well, there's a possibility because, and anyway, and it's too complex for this lecture. But he throws out all the mathematical proof, all the mathematical truths. And he keeps throwing stuff out, and you think, Rene, if you keep doing this, you're not going to be left with much, and you're not going to be able to build on nothing. You have to have something. And he says, well, okay, here's my idea, is I keep doubting, and I doubt this coffee cup and this keyboard and this everything, the air that I breathe. I'm doubting everything. I keep doubting, I keep doubting, I keep doubting. Wait a second, he says. Who is doing this doubting? this doubting is obviously happening because I'm doing this doubting. Who's doing the doubting? I'm doing the doubting. And so he has his famous expression, his famous saying, and this is in Latin because, you know, that's how they do it. Actually, it's funny because Latin was used as the language of scholarship into the 1700s at least. Isaac Newton, if you know him, he wrote about physics. He wrote it in Latin, right? His laws of motion, if you studied those in high school. He wrote it in Latin. It's like, what? Why would he? Wasn't he English? Yeah, he was English, but in English. In England, people who wrote smart stuff usually wrote in Latin. Rene Descartes was kind of funny because he didn't. And so nowadays we say cogito ergo sum. The original version was actually in French because Rene Descartes wrote his books in French. If you knew a little French, you could read them. Cogito ergo sum. Well, what the heck does this mean, Gary? Cogito means I think, and ergo is therefore, and sum is I am. So I am thinking, I am doing this doubting. Well, then I must exist. And so he uses this method of radical doubt. I want to emphasize, Rene Descartes was not a skeptic. There were skeptics. It's a Greek word. It goes all the way back to the time of Socrates. There were skeptics who said, you know, as far as epistemology, the problem is you can't really know anything. I mean, you think you know stuff, but you don't really know stuff. And whatever you think, it doesn't even matter because there's no such thing as truth. And people believe different stuff, and that's fine. And anyway, these are the skeptics. And of course, I'm over summarizing, I'm mischaracterizing their ideas. Some of it's very sophisticated and bears looking at even nowadays. But Rene Descartes did not think that knowledge was impossible. He wasn't a skeptic. What he wanted to do was build up his entire philosophy, all 5 branches, from first principles. He wanted to have something solid he could start with. And so he used this skeptical device. He used this method of radical doubt in order to strip away everything that he wasn't sure of. And once he was sure of something, well, he is sure that he exists. And so now that he exists, he builds back. He's building back up an entire philosophy from this single certainty. And what does his philosophy entail? Well, it entails all kinds of metaphysics. So he knows that if he exists, and he builds it up, and I'm not going into the details, but then yes, actually the world does exist. And yes, this table that I thought existed does exist. And I don't have reason to doubt it anymore because I started from something I was certain of and I built back up. And in fact, he knows that God exists, and he knows that God is good, and he knows that God is eternal. He knows a lot of characteristics of God. He builds up this entire metaphysics. The important thing for us is his method and his epistemology. So he ends up this I am. He does have in his metaphysics and it comes back up, right? And so he ends up with a mind-body dichotomy. There's your mind, your soul is spiritual, and your body is physical. And so this word dichotomy is they're different. They're not alike. They aren't the same. There's nothing about them that is the same. They're entirely, you could think of them as different universes, right? Different kinds of things. The mind is spiritual, the body is physical. And so the question is, well, then how does the mind affect the body? Because look, I just lifted my arm. Well, you can't see. Maybe you can if you look at the thumbnail. Hey, he just lifted his arm. In a face-to-face class, this is always more obvious. When I lift my arm, you go, oh, yeah, he's lifting his arm. Anyway, take it on faith that I am lifting my arm. How are you lifting your arm, Gary? Well, I'm using my mind. Well, wait a second. I thought your mind is spiritual. Yeah. And I thought your body is physical. Yeah. Well, then how come something that's spiritual can affect something that's physical if they're totally different kinds of things? Oh, that's a good question. And Rene Descartes, smartest man alive, actually had an answer to that. And the answer is the pineal gland. He had noticed, people had noticed, not him, but people who dissected dead bodies had noticed that at the base of the brain, the human brain, there's this little tiny, maybe the size of your thumb, maybe, no, smaller than that. Anyway, there's this little organ, this little gland. I think it's pink. And they call it the pineal gland. And humans have those. Well, if you dissect a dog, at the base of a dog's brain, there isn't a pineal gland. Oh, huh. Well, how come humans have? And Rene Descartes believed, he taught, he said that this pineal gland is the thing that intermediates, that connects the mind to the body. And this is kind of clever. It would be more clever if later researchers hadn't discovered that, yes, in fact, dogs do have pineal glands. They're just really, really small. You know, and what's the difference between a human and a dog? Well, humans have souls, you know. Dogs don't go to heaven. It says that in the book of Revelation. Sorry, dog lovers. Cat lovers, you're okay. It doesn't say anything about cats, but it specifically says, there's a line that says dogs do not go to heaven. And it's kind of like, wait, what? Who's? And you know, and there's a context. I'm pulling things out just to make a funny point. But the point being that humans have souls and dogs don't, and humans have pineal glands and dogs don't. Oh, well, then it must be the pineal gland that's connecting the soul to the body. This mind-body dichotomy, it might have been a mistake. There's actually an entire book. It's over on my shelf, and I'm wearing headphones with wires, so I can't walk over and grab it. Author, I want to say it's an Italian, right? This is Q dependence. It's an Italian-sounding name. I think it starts with an M, and it's called Descartes' Error. And what he argues in this book is that when Descartes proposes this mind-body dichotomy, he was barking up the wrong tree. This is just a wrong idea. This is a huge mistake. And it's a very interesting book. It's a popular book. You know, you could read it. Anybody could read it. It wasn't exactly a bestseller, but it was a very, very good seller. Yeah, you might look at it sometime. It's probably in the library or in some library. So his mind-body dichotomy was an important thing. And then Rene Descartes popularized the scientific method. He didn't invent the scientific method, but he popularized it. He wrote this little book in 1637 called Discours sur la Methode, which means a conversation about the method. And the method was this scientific method. And he said, you know, guys, sorry, he was mostly writing for men. I don't know if he used that kind of tone. You know, guys, this is kind of a good way to think about stuff, this scientific method. And you learned it like in 6th grade, right? Scientific method. You think, oh yeah, scientific method. Because of Rene Descartes' little book, and it was this little book where he said, oh, and I'll show you some ways the scientific method is useful. For example, if you wanted to graph an algebraic equation, so there's where he writes about, just as an appendix to the book, it's a couple pages. He says, you could do this thing with this coordinate system. And thanks to the scientific method, we have things like, well, iPhones. And so I always tease my kids. I say, Rene Descartes, smartest man alive, he invented the iPhone. And obviously he didn't, because the iPhone came out in 2007 and Rene Descartes was long gone. But without Rene Descartes and the scientific method, well, we wouldn't have electricity, and we wouldn't have the metallurgy and the stuff that makes an iPhone work. So I always joke, he invented the iPhone. Scientific method was very, very important. How important is it? Well, you know, you could use it for almost anything you wanted. And so ethics. In the past, meaning before Rene Descartes, if you wanted to know what was right, well, there's Plato and Aristotle. But if you really want to know what's right, again, think of the context. We're in Europe. You read the Bible. Yeah, the book of Exodus, chapter 20, it has the 10 commandments, thou shalt not kill. And if you ask yourself, I wonder if it's okay to kill people, it says you're not supposed to. Well, I wonder if it's okay to lie. Well, it says you're not supposed to. And Aristotle, he had done some things, right? He had his golden means. We talked about those. There were different ways of doing ethics. Here's what Rene Descartes says. He says, you know, you've got this scientific method, right? Scientific method. Okay, apply the scientific method to ethics. Use your own brain, not the brain of the Pope, not the brain of a priest, not the brain of someone who wrote the Bible, right? Use your own brain to decide what is right and what is wrong. This is an astonishing thing. This changes the entire world. You don't have to do what your parents say. I mean, I don't want to come down as someone who's saying you shouldn't listen to your parents, because you should listen to your parents. But after you've listened to your parents, after you've listened to your priest, after you've listened to whatever TV show or hip hop song you like, then you have to use your own brain to decide what is right and wrong. This is an astonishing thing to claim. And it got Rene Descartes in lots and lots and lots and lots of trouble. All of his writings are in the Index Librorum. This is a Latin phrase. It means the list of books. And what list of books? It's a Catholic thing. The Roman Catholic Church in Descartes' lifetime said, if you read any of this fellow's books, you are endangering your eternal soul. You might not go to heaven if you listen to what this guy has to say. I mean, this is how radical his ideas are. And nowadays you think, well, what's wrong with this? Well, nothing's wrong with this. This is what we do in the modern age. And in fact, Rene Descartes is considered to be the first modern philosopher. If you look at the catalog, right, you have ancient philosophy, you have a class. Philosophy 104, ancient philosophy, philosophy 105, medieval philosophy, philosophy 106, modern philosophy. If you sign up for a class in modern philosophy, or if you take a class in general philosophy, and the textbook will be divided up chronologically by time like this, the very, very first modern philosophy is Rene Descartes. He entirely changed the world. I mean, with the scientific method and with his ideas, totally changed the world. I can't overemphasize this. Everything is different because of Rene Descartes. And that's why I say Rene Descartes, smartest man alive. Smartest man alive. Did he have ideas on politics? Yeah, he had ideas on politics. And what do you think they were? Well, just follow the king, you know, because he's the king. And yeah, I mean, this is what Thomas Aquinas, who was also very intelligent, said. There's a passage in Romans in the New Testament that says, you know, if there's rulers, they wouldn't be rulers if God didn't let them, and so you should follow the rulers. And yeah, Thomas Aquinas said, kings are kings because, you know, they're kings. You should do what the kings say. And again, I'm over-summarizing, mischaracterizing what he actually said. Thomas Aquinas defended slavery. He said, you know, there's reasons why slavery is okay. And yeah, that's kind of something we don't want to talk about, right? That sounds wrong. Yeah, I'd say it's wrong. Rene Descartes, his ideas of government, of politics, what's the best government? Well, use your brain. You decide who should rule you. Wait, what? Not the king? No, you should pick your own ruler, shouldn't you? Yeah, this is very different. So stuff is happening. Aesthetics, yeah, anyway, he built up, this is the important thing, is he used this method of radical doubt. He built up from first principles. I haven't put that. I hope it's in your notes. I have not written down the phrase first principles. But that was Rene Descartes' idea, was to build philosophy up from first principles. Okay, we're jumping ahead again, skipping a lot of working philosophers and important philosophers. We're not skipping too many important ones. That's a subjective. I shouldn't say that. But we're jumping ahead to the British empiricists. British, that's not a hard word. It means, you know, people from England. People from Britain. They could be Scottish, right? It doesn't have to be England. Empiricists, empiricism. Well, let me put some categories here. Metaphysics. And then we're going to have epistemology. The reason they're called empiricists, it's related to it's from a Latin word that means experience. And the empiricists in their epistemology all agreed, and I'm going to list 3 of them. They differed in their metaphysics. But what they said about epistemology is that knowledge comes from experience. If you know something, it's because you experienced something. The reason you know about red is not because, this is what Socrates taught, it's not because just before you were born, you were taken through the land of forms and you were shown the form of red. And now when you see red things, it kind of reminds you of the redness that you saw in that prenatal condition. And so, oh yeah, red things, horse things, triangle things, chair things. It's not that you saw a form and you're recognizing it. No, it's because you experienced redness. Probably not so much in the womb. I mean, in the womb, yeah, we know now that you hear some sounds. But what they believed is that when you are born, your mind is a tabula rasa. Now, the nice thing about these British empiricists is that they were writing in English, not Latin, but every once in a while they would throw in a Latin phrase. So this tabula rasa, this is a Latin phrase. Tabula is a table, and think of a tablet like a flat board with some wax on it. And this is what the ancient Roman schoolboys used, is a wax tablet, and they had a stylus, kind of like the stylus I'm using right now. And they would scratch things into this wax, and so they could write. And then when you wanted to write something else, you kind of press down the wax, you flatten it out again so it's smooth, and then you have a blank tablet. And this word rasa means blank. You are born with a blank slate. Your mind is a blank slate. There is nothing in your mind. There isn't some pre-knowledge of forms. There's nothing. So everything you know comes from experience. So let's name a couple of these guys. There was Locke. There was Berkeley. It looks like Berkeley, but he's British, and so that's how you pronounce it. Bishop Berkeley. He was a Christian. He was actually a bishop of the Church of England. Yeah, let's mention that. What are his metaphysics? Well, there's some Christianity in there. Hume, by contrast, Hume was an atheist. When he was old and just about to die, lots of people, and I mean lots of people, you read about it and you think, didn't this annoy him? I would be annoyed. But all these people came and huddled around his deathbed because they wanted to hear his deathbed recantation. They wanted him to finally admit that there is a God and he could become a Christian right just before he died so that he could go to heaven. And he didn't. He was an atheist to the very, very end. Earlier, we talked about cause and the different kinds of causes. Hume said there's no such thing as cause. And you think, wait, what do you mean no such thing as cause? And Hume says, well, look, everything comes from experience, right? Yeah, okay. Well, so show me some cause. Okay, I'll show you. And the classical metaphor for this is the billiard balls, right? So I've got this white billiard ball, and it moves across the table, and it hits the black billiard ball and causes it to move. And we've all seen this, and yeah, that's cause. What's the big deal? And Hume says, wait. I want to make sure that I see it. Okay, I'll show you, Mr. Hume. Do you see the white billiard ball? Yeah, I see it. And do you see how it's rolling across the table? Yeah, I see that. And do you see how the black billiard ball is just sitting there? Yeah, I see the black billiard ball is just sitting there. And you see how the white billiard ball is getting closer and closer and closer to the black billiard ball? Yeah. And then it hits it? Yeah. And then the black billiard ball starts to move? Yeah. Well, that's the cause. And Hume says, no, wait. I see the white billiard ball, it's moving. And I see the black billiard ball, it's just sitting there. And I see it hit. And then I see the black billiard ball move. But I don't see what you're calling cause. I'm seeing something's happening, the white billiard ball's moving. And then something else happens, it hits it. And then I see something else happens, the black billiard ball starts to move. But I don't see this thing you are calling cause. I'm just seeing several different actions, and I don't actually see the connection, the underlying connection that you're talking about these actions. I just see a sequence of actions. There's no such thing as cause. I can't see it, so it doesn't exist. And I'm summarizing, and you think, well, that's stupid. But if you read it, and you could, I mean, Hume in particular is fun to read. All of these fellows, they're British. This is like 17th, 18th century, and their sentences are long, and some of their words are big, and you kind of have to pay attention and get into it. They're not super easy reading. They're not as bad as the Germans we'll talk about in a minute. But you could read these. Locke has an essay concerning human understanding. I might mention that. And it has big sentences. It has fabulous ideas. You could read it, your college kids. I've read it, and I can remember thinking, oh my gosh. I mean, almost every page I'm thinking, whoa. And you go outside, and the world looks a little different. And that's what you want from a book, is to grow. That was one of the things that Locke wrote. Hume has this great personality, and you read and you laugh every once in a while because he doesn't pull any punches. Berkeley wrote this cute thing, and you might not have interest, but We just talked about Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton invented calculus, and Berkeley said, this is ridiculous. This is stupid. Where are you getting these ideas? And he attacked it from the point of view of philosophy. And he did actually a very, very good job. And at the time, people kind of ignored him because calculus was working. You could do calculus and you could get results that were useful in the real world. But Berkeley's criticisms were cogent. They had a basis. Newton was doing stuff that he didn't have a good reason for. And it wasn't until the 1800s there were some French mathematicians, Cauchy and some others, who put calculus on the logical foundation that it needed. Well, if you take calculus from me, I don't know what the other calculus professors do, but I talk about it because I always give the history and I'm always connecting ideas. So they wrote on all kinds of stuff. Locke also wrote, what's this, Politics. We said one of our questions in philosophy for politics is, what is the best form of government? And Locke had this crazy idea. I mean, I don't want you to laugh, but this is in the early 1700s. And what he said is the best form of government would be a constitutional republic with 3 separate branches. Is this wild or what? And these branches, he called them the executive, the legislative, the judicial. And you think, wait, when I was a senior in high school, I had my government class, and that's what we do. Yeah, it's exactly what we do. The founding fathers, apologies to the women who were involved, but the founding fathers of the American Republic, they really liked Locke's books on politics. They really liked his ideas, and they thought, hey, let's try this. This guy has this. I mean, think of what everyone is doing in the entire world. No one is doing this. And that's why I say this is a crazy idea. And well, we live in 2020, and we're a long ways from 1776, and we think, what's crazy about this? It works really, really well. I mean, maybe not right now because stuff is happening. But yeah, this was John Locke's idea. It's not a bad idea. It seems to have had some success over the ages. Big thing, takeaways from this is knowledge comes from experience. There is absolutely nothing in your mind when you are born. And Hume has this very good argument, it's hard to knock it down, that there's no such thing as cause. And you think, well, wait a second, if there's no such thing as cause, then how do you live your life? And Hume had an answer. He says, I live my life just like everybody else lives their lives. I don't think there's cause, but it doesn't change anything I do. And you're thinking, well, that's kind of a weasel way out. But anyway, his argument's very, very good. You should read it. And it'll make you wonder for a few days. You'll walk around and go, what? If there's no, well then how? Huh. That's good for you. We're moving forward another 50 or 100 years. And we're skipping all kinds of people who are doing good philosophy. We're just kind of hitting the iconoclast, people who say the opposite of what was just before. We leave England, we go to Germany, and we have Immanuel Kant. K-A-N-T. Kant was a very, very systematic philosopher. He wrote extensively on all 5 branches of philosophy. Kant has books on epistemology, on metaphysics, on ethics, on politics, on aesthetics. His aesthetic stuff is still very important. All of what Kant wrote is still very, very, very important. And Kant was reacting to 2 different things. One reaction was he really was bugged by Hume's argument that there's no such thing as cause. And he didn't have a way of defeating that. It frustrated him, it annoyed him. But let's start with his metaphysics. What is reality? Reality is the Ding an sich. So he's writing in German. Kant is difficult to read. I've said, you could read these British empiricists. You could read Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica. Get a version in English with some commentary with a nice preface that explains the method, because he's using logic, right? That's Thomas Aquinas. A lot of these people you can read. Kant, yeah, you could read Kant, but I don't think you're going to enjoy it. I mean, I just don't think you are. It's difficult stuff. If you want to know more about Kant, you will probably be happier with a book about Kant rather than a book by Kant. So this is a German phrase. It means the thing in itself. So we keep talking about this table. Why do we keep talking? Because it's so handy. If you go to a philosophy lecture, you will be amazed at how often your philosophy professor talks about the lectern that he's standing behind. Because it's there, it's convenient. It's a third-party object, and he can talk about it in an objective way. And it's just kind of funny how often that happens. But anyway, so here's this table. Well, what's the real table? The table in itself, not the table as I'm experiencing it, right? Because I look at the table and it's kind of brown. Well, wait, is it really brown? And nowadays we know a lot more physics than Kant knew, but this table is made out of molecules. And none of those molecules are brown, right? I mean, they're not. And so there's a table, the Ding an sich, the table in itself, not as the table is experienced. And Kant called this the noumenal world. Does it kind of sound like the world of forms? It kind of sounds, there's a relation. I'm going to draw a line. I haven't been drawing a line usually, but I want to emphasize that there is a difference between the noumenal world and the phenomenal world. The phenomenal world, these come from Greek words, right? It's like, oh, how many languages do I have to know to study philosophy? This is the world of appearances. And it kind of sounds like Socrates' idea, the reflection, the shadow of the real world. And it's not the same idea, because this isn't a world of forms. This is the world of, this table is a real thing. I just haven't ever experienced this table. I've never had any connection, any experience, any relation to the Ding an sich, the table in itself. And I think you say to yourself, well, you can't see me. If we were face to face, you'd see I'm holding on to the table. I mean, just to explain this, I've grabbed this table and I've been holding on to it tightly this whole time to emphasize I'm holding this table. But I'm not holding the table because, and nowadays physicists know this, the amount of space in between the subatomic particles in this table are big enough, and the subatomic particles in my hand are spaced big enough, I should be able to put my hand right through this table. And of course, there's weak force and strong force, and there's reasons why I can't in physics. But I'm not experiencing anything like what this table is actually like. And you say, oh, you mean at the quantum level? I mean at the philosophical level. Go past physics. Go to, what is the table, the Ding an sich. I've never actually experienced that. I've only experienced, my hands, don't even use my hands. I'm not touching the table anymore. I'm just going to use my eyes. I'm looking at the table. Okay, yeah, I see a table. It's brown. Well, if you go to an art class, they'll say it's not really brown. Some parts are brown, but some parts are this dark brown. Well, yeah, because they're shadow. And some parts, oh, and you realize, right, snow. People say snow is white. Take a photography class, take an art class, you'll find out snow's actually blue. It looks white because, yeah, snow anyway. Or it looks blue and it is white. I don't know which is which. Anyway, if I'm looking at this table, there's a whole bunch of things about this table that I'm not experiencing. I have a light bulb that is shining down on this table, right? And I try to get this reflective thing. One of these days, I'm going to buy proper lights so that my videos look much, much better. There's nothing I can do about myself. Maybe makeup? No, I'm not that guy. But wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to make me look a little better? Well, yeah, if I got brighter lights. So I have this one light. It is shining on this table. Well, what's happening because it's shining on the table? Well, the table's heating up. The table's just a little warmer. If I put my hand over there, I'd feel, oh yeah, the table's a little warmer. But back to my eyes, the table is warmer. That means there's infrared radiation coming off it. I don't see it, right? My world of appearances, I am not experiencing that. I am not really interacting with the real table as the table is. What does this mean? This means the mind. So think of Rene Descartes and the mind-body dichotomy, Kant pushes that a lot farther. The mind comes between you and reality. So just as my eyes cannot see infrared, they can't see ultraviolet either. A bee's eyes can see ultraviolet. Bees can see more than me, but there are things they can't see, right? My eyes prevent me from seeing everything that there is about, say, this table. My mind prevents me from knowing everything there is to know about this table. And let's solve Hume's problem, and then we're going to have to stop. We'll pick this thread up next time, but I want to finish this epistemology, so I'm going one more minute. According to Kant, the mind comes preloaded. That's not his phrase. I'm oversimplifying all of this. Take a real philosophy class, kids. It has different categories, such as space. I think this table occupies a certain amount of space. It's about 4 feet long, and then it has an L, and then it extends like 3.5 more feet, and it's about 2.5 feet deep, and it's 3 feet off the. So this idea of space, I don't know anything about space. I say, well, yeah, I do. There's three-dimensional. Why do I think it's three-dimensional? Because my mind is preloaded with these categories of 3 dimensions. And that's the only reason I experience the noumenal world, the Ding an sich. It's the only reason I experience those as having 3-dimensional space, because of the way my mind filters reality. Another important filter, another important category is time. I think that stuff happened a while ago, and I think that stuff will happen in the future. All of that, I don't know what reality has for time. Maybe everything happens at once, right? I don't know. But my mind has time built into it, and so I always experience things in a temporal fashion. And this is what he does with cause. There's a white billiard ball moves, and it hits the black billiard ball, and the black billiard ball moves, and my mind has this category of causation, and that's why I experience those things as having a cause. And what really happens, I don't have any idea. How would I know? I've never experienced the Ding an sich. I can only experience the categories from my mind. And so this is directly opposed to what the British empiricists said. They said your mind is a tabula rasa. It's empty. There's nothing in it. And Kant says, no, your mind has a bunch of things. And there's, like a dozen or so of these. You could look them up. We will come back next time. We will do some ethics. We'll mention that he wrote a lot about politics and aesthetics. We will do some things with Bayes' theorem. We will connect all of these things, and we will connect them in a remarkable way, and you will see that they do directly apply, directly impinge on everything you are doing in your college class, and in fact, the rest of your life. Cool. So thank you all so much, and we will see you next week.